Hello, King of the Pit Media. I'm going to talk about a very controversial figure, okay? And I'm going to talk about my personal relationship with the band in question. Not that I knew any of them personally, but this was arguably my favourite band for a brief moment, or at least up there in my top 5 free bands for a relatively brief moment of my younger years. I'm going to talk about the Lostprophets. As of recent, the frontman, or ex-frontman, Ian Watkins, was killed. He was taken out not so far away from where I'm based. He was put up in Wakefield prison. I don't know if it was a special sort of prison. He was definitely within a special community of people. That's for sure. And they got him out of here. I wonder how that came about. I don't know too much about the story, about who did it and whatnot. I know there were 2 individuals, and I've seen a couple of things. Maybe one of the 2 at least was a bit of a wrong in themselves. I don't know. I don't really care, to be honest, but he's out of here. And you see all of the content creators, or larger names, you know, talking heads per se, who have all done their little bit. Ian Watkins has been killed, blah, blah, blah. And you'll watch a couple of them. You think, all right, let's see what this person has got to say. And they'll just be like, oh my God, I didn't know he was this bad and so forth. And it's like, whoa. Like, you literally will just jump on anything down to the fact that it's a topic of discussion. All right? It's crazy. Like, you're here talking about this crazy nonsense purely down to the fact that everybody else is talking. You've got no interest in it other than the fact to make a couple of quid based on this nonsense. It's crazy. And I'm throwing shade to a degree. I just think it's sad to sail to such a heavy degree. But with that being said, this was arguably my favourite band for a very brief period. So I got into this act via, and don't get me wrong, this isn't going to be all about me slating Ian Watkins. I'm going to talk to you about my experience with the act. I even knew somebody, a friend of mine, who was employed over at that prison, who had engaged with him. So hold on, people. Hold on. Do I have much gossip about it? I don't know. You'll have to find out. So I got into this act via Liberation Transmission. I think that was the name of the record. It was their 3rd LP, I believe. And I downloaded it off of iTunes back when I was younger. Not with my card. All right. I used the card without asking permission. I was misbehaved, thought I'd get away with it. I ended up getting gripped using that same card and downloading the greatest Kiss hits. Kiss Greatest Hits, which I wouldn't recommend, by the way. Kiss aren't a great band, to be honest. Don't know anybody who's really into Kiss, but I downloaded Liberation Transmission and I was there playing RuneScape. I had the first track on repeat. What was that first track? Everyday Combat. Da, 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 da. I loved it. It gassed me, got me excited. Very palatable record, very enjoyable record, because then when I explored the earlier couple of records, I found a relationship to the development of like Avenged Sevenfold. We start off in a more harsh, metalcore rooted space, and then we start to become a little more marketable. We start to compose a few more better songs in the gist of the sequencing of the album as a whole, and we start to find our footing as we broaden the catalogue. Now, I thought this band were phenomenal as a young teenager because they engaged with a real emotional element, which I'm going to talk about because I actually revisited these songs post news of Ian Watkins, and I'll tell you about that story and how I felt listening to the band from there on. You know, it was just a momentary experience, but it was a fascinating one, and it's sort of what spurred me on to, you know, talk about this. And it's crazy because I didn't fathom how large scale of a band they were. I was in a position of experimenting with music at this point. I was just consuming and absorbing so much content as far as music was concerned. Fathoms upon fathoms. I had one of them. How many gigs was it? Was it 64 gig? iPod Classic? It wasn't the full scale 120. I think it was just 60 gig, right? But it was fair enough content to get on there. Shouldn't necessarily use the word content for music, but I rammed that iPod full of stuff. Once my mate put me onto particular sites where you could download stuff maybe for free, and I accidentally downloaded some music for free, and we clogged that iPod up with so much material. But I really enjoyed the Lostprophets material, and I didn't hang around listening to them long enough to hear the fourth album, which I had a close friend of mine who was very into the band as well, and he enjoyed that record. I think it was called The Betrayed or something like that, and I don't know if they went on to do an album after that. You know, I don't know the timeline as far as this guy getting gripped and getting sent down and whatnot, and what happened. I don't even know like what their live performances were and all that. I didn't care for seeing them live. I just enjoyed the audio experience. But this band could put a good ballad together and hit you in the feels, as well as creating an upbeat, guitar-driven powerhouse of a number. Now, it raises questions in relation to the band members other than Ian Watkins, and to what degree did they actually know? Because pressure must have been on them. Whoa, imagine being in the band and I know I'm making light of this. Hopefully you who has joined this conversation are very well aware what Ian Watkins got up to. The guy went off the deep end, right? And I read, back when he got gripped, I read the, I don't know what you would call it. It's like a thorough description. It's like a thorough report, a legal report of what, he was getting sent down for, and so much of the detail. And he was a madhead, absolute madhead. So, I mean, it sort of freezes you in your tracks when you think back to the severity of his mind state and actions, but it is kind of mad. It is kind of mad. My brain's frozen a little bit here. So he gets sent down, and we were talking about the rest of the band. So having involved myself in a couple of projects over the years, when you are working consistently with an act, you do have to deal with and juggle the highs and lows of the people you're with. It's political, and you spend a long time with people, and let's say money's involved, let's say creative values are involved, let's say leadership is involved, and following like a subordinate role within the group. There's a hierarchy within these projects and acts and stuff where you see elements of people you wouldn't see normally, given it was just a friendship, a mutual friendship. So I wouldn't cast judgment on the band saying that they would know the extent as to how deep this guy was into his interests, but you shouldn't identify a darkness that emanated from a person who was engaged in such acts. You know, it's like I said, I'm not casting judgment or pointing fingers, but if you were to put yourself in their shoes, and good shoes won't save you this time, that was a good number by them. I like that one. If this guy is the be all and end all of the band, because he was essentially the essence of the band, I don't know who else was in the band. I don't care who else was in the band. He was the front of the band. He was the character, right? If you know if this guy's gone, if he gets in trouble, if it's over, then it's over for your career. You're fulfilling your childhood dream. You're performing in this epic rock act before hundreds of thousands of people on a regular basis. Maybe not in one sitting, but do you know what I mean? Across the board. And you're having the time of your life, being noticed as someone who has fulfilled their childhood dream, you know, really fulfilling. What a terrible position it must be in. And I'm not saying that you got to keep your mouth shut. You're going to have to speak up, right? You're going to have to prevent badness happening. But that's such a uncomfortable situation to have everything and then maybe pull the plug on your own successful reality. That's mad. Imagine how hard that would be to do. So whether anybody had an inkling of what was happening or not, I can believe it going both ways as far as do we tell them or do we not, do you know? But with that being said, let's talk more so about my experience. So after the news had come out, maybe so many years after, I can't remember the timeline, like I said, I hopped in my car one night and I was gonna get myself to the gym. So it's either real late at night or it's very, very early in the morning. Completely empty, pitch black roads. Gym all to myself. Pristine, fantastic, love it. And I thought, you know what? We'll bang a couple of these numbers on, and I know I'm not the only one, because back then I saw it, and right now I see it. If you go on your streaming service and look at the monthly listeners of this act, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I was looking at like 800,000 people, monthly listeners to this act, regardless. So it gets into a conversation about separating the art from the artist at this point. And you'd think, you know, it's an understandable concept. But then I put the record on and I had such a bizarre and unique, as far as my musical journey has gone, experience listening to this music, because the writing's phenomenal. Like I knew each and every lyric coming up, really enjoyed the melodies, continued to appreciate the quality of the writing, the musicianship, the craft, the production, how it was sounding, and especially there's a bias there of the nostalgic value that emanated from the music. But then on the flip side, there was this negative factor. I shouldn't be listening to this. There's a dirtiness to this. Imagine if I got caught listening to this. So at that point, I acknowledged separating from the art from the artist isn't always possible, at least from my perspective in my world. To have to shut off and to have this dark cloud upon art that I emphasized and pedestalized in my youth. And you know what that is. Isn't music the most powerful thing when you're young and rebellious and developing into adulthood and finding independence, and you're starting to associate and find connection to these acts and these songs, and you're creating a bond that is special only between, which is the beautiful component of art, which is ever so special. It's the subjectivity that, you know, someone could say, oh, you're going to have to check this record out. Oh, that's the best album ever. But they're not talking about the music. They're talking about their relationship with that record, because they were going through a particular moment in time when they came across that music, when it made a mark on their life. They're expressing themselves in relation to their personal opinion on that music. To you, it could just be a good melody, a good song, but to them, it associates with a particular moment in their life that they might not consciously be aware of, but there's a emotional tie that is triggered when you engage with the music. So I listened to these songs as I was driving forth. Don't know if I managed to make the entire journey whilst listening to these songs, but I thought, flipping hell, like, what an insane barrage of feeling I'm experiencing now from this, you know. And yeah, to put a long story short, a friend of mine worked within the grounds at Wakefield, and I don't know as to whether he actually spoke to Ian or not, but it was definitely in the presence of him. I didn't push further for information, to be honest. I didn't really pry open engagement over this, because I thought it was kind of a bit mad that we're speaking about, oh, I'm in there with him in, you know, a little bit of a gloaty fashion, right? Kind of mad. And I'm not going to go in on that. I'm just going to say it goes to show, no matter the extremity of people's actions, the star power, the notoriety, the effect, a reputation, and the celebrity status has can still, you know, make you feel some degree of cool for, like, being in association with it. And I'm not speaking in relation to myself or who I am, but as far as this world is concerned, because I know supposedly he had a lot of girls, like, writing to him and stuff like that, regardless of his actions. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? There's a particular term for that. Women who write to, like, serial killers and stuff. There's a particular term for that psychological phenomena. And no doubt it's the same degree when it came to him. But he's gone now, and I think it's a good thing. Most definitely a good thing. And it fills me with odd feelings, because, like I said, it was I had a heavy emotional tie to the music, being a outcasted, rebellious teenager, finding myself through that music, growing up through enjoying the experience and the thrill of how this music made me feel. And then you get over it, and then somebody says to you one time, oh yeah, well, nobody says it to you, you just come across it everywhere. Oh, this guy has been gripped doing this crazy stuff and acting in this manner, not in a way that it's just like, oh, this guy has been caught misbehaving. It's like, this guy has been caught and is here in writing. He's been exposed with this trail of sinister action. It's crazy. But yeah, I thought I'd just put that to rest, because on the reaction channel, every time we hear a metalcore band or something, there's a couple of elements in there that I relay back to the Lostprophets, and I think, oh, it reminds me of them. It sounds like this, it sounds like that. And then I sort of go on a tangent a little bit about that act, because it's like an anchor point for me of how, you know, as far as music referencing is concerned. And yeah, I thought, you know what, we'll just turn it into a video, call it a day. The nail's in the coffin now. I don't know what the rest of the band is doing. No doubt they're still in music, but it's crazy. They were on top of the world, and then, is that not insane? I'm signing out on that one. Peace.